So, let's turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, see what we can learn this morning. The book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to be all over this book. Beautiful passage of Scripture, 12 chapters actually. And I wanted to take some time this morning and look a little deeper at it. Lots of times passages, verses are taken from the book of Ecclesiastes and used to prove some point. But I was brought to the book of Ecclesiastes last week, and I looked at it and I thought, man, this is powerful. How do we look at it in its entirety? Let's get started. It is a common image. A person walking up a steep mountain to speak to a man who has meditated and who has discovered the answers to all of life's greatest questions. Particularly the one that I told you about this morning in Bible class, what is the meaning of life? And this is an image that you may have seen at one point or another, and perhaps you are wondering this very same question. What is the meaning of life? We all have a lot of questions about life that would fall under this category. Why did this person have to die? Why am I struggling? Why is this going on in my life? When people struggle, these are the questions they ask. And this one comes up a lot, even for teenagers in particular, I would say. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? And oftentimes we will struggle with this question. Well, Job, someone who experienced a great deal in his life, said this of man. Man who is born of woman is short-lived and full of turmoil. Like a flower, he comes forth and withers. He also flees like a shadow and does not remain. After we go through the book of Ecclesiastes, I think you will see that this particular passage encapsulates Ecclesiastes very, very well. So as you ask the question, what is the meaning of life? Let's ask this question as well. Who do you listen to about life and about living? Because if you have that question, if you wonder, why are we here? What is this about? What is eternity? Does eternity exist? You have to also ask this question. Because whether you're going to a mountaintop to ask a guru, or you are listening to politicians maybe listening to talk show hosts, maybe listening to YouTubers, whoever you might listen to, I hope that person has it together. I hope that person has a Christian example that you would and should be following. But we've got to look at the person's credibility. Okay? Before we dive into somebody's philosophies and theories about life, whatever category they might belong to, we've got to ask ourselves, do they have credibility? Okay? The guru on the mountaintop, we think has credibility because he's just sat around and thought the whole time. Okay? That's why that image, I think, is so very popular. But who should we look to whenever we think about life and about why we are here exactly? Who has some credibility to him? I think King Solomon does. King Solomon, generally accepted as the writer of Ecclesiastes, experienced so much, and he talks about his experiences in the book of Ecclesiastes. If there's a self-help book, book within the Bible, it would have to be the book of Ecclesiastes. He was even blessed with the gift of wisdom by our Heavenly Father. And this is who I want to listen to. I don't want to listen to people on the news, on the radio, although there's some good information out there. The one I want to listen to about how to live my life in the best way possible, in the simplest form possible, because we could talk about this for a very long time, but I want to listen to wise King Solomon. And I think after we talk about the book this morning, you'll see why. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. If you'll look at verse 1 of chapter 1, he actually calls himself a preacher. So he's been a king, he's a wise man, and here he refers to himself in verse 1 as a preacher. Now, Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 12. I, the preacher, there it is again, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my mind to seek and explore by wisdom concerning all that has been done under heaven. So you see, he's the guru on the mountaintop. He's been thinking for a while. He's been sitting around. He's had servants to take care of all of his purposes that he didn't have to do. So he's had time to sit and think, not to mention the wisdom that God blessed him with. It is a grievous task which God has given to the sons of men to be afflicted with. So thinking about this question, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? He mentions that somewhat in verse 13. I set my mind to explore all that has been done under heaven. I'm thinking about life, he says. I'm thinking about why I'm here. I'm thinking about why other people are here. I'm thinking about life. And this is a grievous task, because we should all consider it. If you're living in this world, you must consider, why am I here? What am I doing? What is my purpose? So let's start off with this question. What is the meaning of life? If you knew, you might feel better about some things. Why are you here exactly? Are you here to be good at something? Are you here to do something in particular? Teenagers, this is a good question for you, young people. Why are you here? What will your life hold within the next 20 years? What's going to be going on for you? Are you going to make good decisions, or are you going to make bad decisions? Are you going to be in jail, or are you going to be at home? Where are you going to be? Because you've got the whole world ahead of you right now. Listen to me this morning, the wisdom from the book of Ecclesiastes. Because there's a lot of ways you can spend your time on this earth. And a lot of teenagers at this point in their life, middle school and high school, are trying to decide how they're going to be spending the next 20 years. What are they going to be doing? And whenever you can ask the question, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What should we be doing? Whenever you ask that question, you can find a bit more direction in your life. Well, sometimes people think, though, that they're here to earn money. And they might not say that, I don't love money. Well, a lot of our time, maybe most of our time, is spent trying to earn it, trying to make a living, is it not? It is human to want more. We find ourselves sometimes engulfed in an endless pursuit of wealth, possession, and power. And if we're not working for it, we are wishing we had it. And when is it enough? Are you here to have a family? It seems a major goal for many people, to get married, have children. Well, not everybody wants this. Not everybody should have it, okay? Maybe it's not in the cards for you. It is generally accepted that Paul the Apostle was never married, and he saw it as a blessing, so he could serve God better. He could be more about that business of serving God, being a servant to others, showing them Christ. So these two areas aren't necessarily the meaning of life. Shouldn't be necessarily what you are completely and totally about. It can be easy to lose sight of who we are and why we do what we do if we don't have a meaning that is worth something somehow. Have you ever seen someone working at their job and they just look miserable? They just look absolutely miserable. I would have to say, in my opinion, those who maybe sit all day and maybe a toll booth operator. There, I'll just say it. We don't have toll booth operators in here, I don't think. But when you're traveling down through Florida, man, they just don't look like they're enjoying themselves. I'd enjoy it because I get to talk to everybody. Maybe for just 3 seconds. But imagine how many people you could talk to in a day. That sounds pretty interesting. But those people who are doing jobs like that seem just miserable, I wonder if they ask that question, why am I here? Am I here to do this job? Am I here to do that job? Am I here to take care of this? Am I here to take care of that? So that's the question we're exploring this morning. And I hope you have found it in your life, asking that question, why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to be working, eating, sleeping, waking up, working, eating, sleeping? Is that what I'm all about? Is that all that I'm about? My sport, my school activity? Is that the only thing that I'm supposed to do in this life? Is there more? Yes, there is. And Solomon went through it, though. He explored these areas and more in some detail. Let's go on to Ecclesiastes chapter 2. Solomon explored life through various things, and he deems them as folly. The first thing he talks about in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 is the folly of pleasure and possessions. Verse 1, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. It's futile. It's vain. That's a lot of what the book of Ecclesiastes says. You're going to do this or you're going to do that, and it's not going to have a purpose. It's going to be futile ultimately. It's not going to be all that you thought it was going to be, Christian. It's not going to be all the happiness and bring all the happiness that you thought it would. And he says in verse 1, I'm going to test life with pleasure. I'm going to try to do all the pleasurable things I can. King Solomon, very wealthy, he could do this. Very easy for him to do. I said of laughter, it is madness. Maybe he had some jesters that would come and help him laugh, that would entertain him. And he says of pleasure, what does it accomplish? Laughter is madness. And what does pleasure do? It accomplishes nothing. He says it is vain, it is futile. I explored with my mind how to stimulate my body with wine, so I tried to entertain myself with alcohol, while my mind was guiding me wisely in how to take hold of folly until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their life. So I tried to have pleasure one way or another. And then in verses 4 through 8, he lists several things that he does. I enlarged my works. I made gardens and parks. I made ponds. I'm doing all of these things, and it is all vain. It is all futile. So I'm working and working and working, and I'm done with all this work and seeking pleasure, and it's not done anything for me. Chapter 2, in verse 12, he looks at, ironically enough, he looks at wisdom. Verse 12 says, so I turned to consider wisdom, madness and folly. For what will the man do who will come after the king except what has already been done? Solomon knows. Solomon says, I am wise. I've been blessed with that. That's what I asked God for. And I have wisdom. But what's going to happen when I'm gone? I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be dead just like the man without wisdom. So even wisdom is foolish, he says. Verse 15, I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why then have I been extremely wise? So I said to myself, this too is vanity. Man, I wish I was smarter. I wish I was this, or I wish I was that. It's not going to make any difference because our fates are the same. Verse 16, there is no lasting remembrance of the wise man as with the fool, inasmuch as in the coming days all will be forgotten. It's all going to just go away anyway, he says. And how the wise man and the fool alike die. So as much as you want to be wiser, and if you do, pursue that. But some people pursue pleasure, some people pursue wisdom to the detriment of their health, to the detriment of those important things that they should be going after. So I hated life, verse 17. For the work which had been done under the sun was grievous to me, because everything is futility and striving after the wind. There's that imagery he uses a whole lot, going after the wind. You just can't catch it. So it's folly. The folly of work. Verse 18, thus I hated all the fruit of my labor, for which I had labored under the sun, for I must leave it to the man who will come after me. So Solomon's saying, and apply this to your life as you will, Solomon is saying, I must work and work and work. And why am I working? I'm just going to give it to the next guy. Verse 19, and who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool? Who knows what he will do? I'm going to leave all this to somebody who doesn't know what he's doing. Yet he will have control over all the fruit of my labor, for which I have labored by acting wisely under the sun. This too is vanity. So all that Solomon has been known for, he's saying it is vanity. Verse 23, because all his days his task is painful and grievous. Even at night his mind does not rest. This too is vanity. So the folly of work is, you see, you're sacrificing your health. You're not taking care of yourself. Spoiler alert, that's where we're going right here. Okay, it's okay to work. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's okay to work. It's okay to be your best. But you can't do it to the sacrifice of rest, to the sacrifice of your health, verse 23. He continues in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Talks about the folly of seeking power. What do we do a lot of times? We try to seek power. We try to be influential. We try to take over one thing or another. Let's look at what he says. Ecclesiastes 4 and verse 1. Then again I looked at all the acts of oppression which were being done under the sun. And behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. So all the oppression, all the difficulty that's going on in the world in that day, and I would offer today as well, all of the oppression that's going on, it's because of people who are not being comforted. These people are not being comforted, you see. I saw the tears of the oppressed. They had no one to comfort them. And on the side of their oppressors was power. But they had no one to comfort them. So you have the oppressed and you have the oppressor, and no one is there to comfort those people. So I congratulated the dead who are already dead more than the living who are still living. You know, don't worry about this power struggle. Okay, guess who doesn't have to worry about it? The dead don't. He is saying the dead do not have to worry about this power struggle. But better off than both of them is the one who has never existed, who has never even seen the evil activity that is done under the sun. I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor. This too is vanity and striving after the wind. So verse 4, all of this that's going on is the result of rivalry because people are seeking for power, and he is saying it is vain. How many Facebook arguments have you won? How much power have you gained because of Facebook arguments? How much money have you earned? How many friends have you made because of the rivalry that is seen among people on social media? How has it enriched your life? It is not, because it is vain. I used to sit at the computer and write long, flowing exposés as to why my ignorant friend made the statements that he did and how he was wrong. It didn't do anything but waste my time. So there is futility in trying to change someone's mind. You know how you change somebody's mind? You sit down and you break bread with them. You sit down and you make friends with people and you have relationships. And maybe you'll change their mind, or maybe your mind will be changed and affected if that be necessary. He says it's vain to be going after power. Verses 13 through 16 talks about a poor, wise lad and how he is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction. For he has come out of prison to become king, even though he was born in his kingdom, verse 15. I have seen all the living under the sun throng to the side of the second lad who replaces him. So you got a power struggle here. You've got an old king who will not receive instruction. You've got a poor lad who's ready to take over his throne, and everybody goes to him. Verse 16, there is no end to all the people, to all who were before them, and even the ones who will come later will not be happy with him. For this too is vanity and striving after the wind. So we've got this new king that's coming in. Everybody's so happy, so glad. Oh, he's going to be our Savior. We're just going to love him. And what's going to happen later? His way will be just like the old king who would not receive instruction, and the people were tired of it. And that same pattern follows one right after the other. Right? You've got the one that moves in. Everybody's so happy about it. And he says it's just vanity. You're wasting too much time on that. And perhaps there is a lesson there for our political state, for how we interact with one another. We're so happy about the one who comes in, and we put energy and time into that. And, you know, it's worthwhile to discuss. It sure is. But how much are you really getting from it? And are you wasting your time? And are you making more enemies than you are friends? Question is, what's it doing for God? What's it doing for your Christian life if you're spending so much time on politics, on seeking power, on trying to be right? Solomon says, it is vanity. The Folly of Riches, chapter 5, verse 10. The Folly of Riches. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with his income. This too is vanity. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage to their owners except to look on? The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to sleep. It is folly to seek after riches as well. So as Solomon is telling us that all of this is folly, what did he learn? What did Solomon learn, and what can we learn based on this message? As humans, we always want to make better sense of things. We want the world to fit into our point of view, into our paradigm, because it makes everything nice and neat and predictable. When Job's friends went to him, they would say, "Job, we know you did something wrong because good people aren't punished." Well, that's not true. The rain falls on the just and on the unjust, does it not? But we still today, though, struggle with that idea. I'm a good person, I should get good things. Okay? A rock goes down a hill because of gravity. Water boils when it's heated. Hard work gets rewarded. If I work, I'll get riches. I enjoy my work, but all the while, you're sacrificing something. Solomon says those things are vanity. We often think that if we live well, we will be blessed, that things will work out for us. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 9, please. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 10 through 12. You know, Solomon in Ecclesiastes, he keeps it real. Okay? He's not trying to make everybody feel good. Okay? He's lived his life. He's got wisdom, and he's trying to help people understand what life is all about. And we would say today that he keeps it real, and he does here. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 10 through 12. Whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. So work hard. He's not saying that. He's not saying be lazy. Okay? He's not saying don't have things. He's not saying quit earning money. He's not saying that. Okay? So do it with all your might. If you're going to work, do it well. For there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. So in the afterlife, you're not going to be working. So, you kind of need to work now. But in verse 11, I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors. We think if we work hard, we'll be blessed. And there's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio there. He says in verse 11, that's not the case. I looked around me and I saw that the race is not to the fastest runner, and the battle is not to the warriors. Okay, I saw that things don't always work out as we think they should. Okay, you see a tall person, you think, he plays basketball. He probably hates basketball. Okay, that's one of those things that doesn't always line up with our perception. And neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to the men of ability. For time and chance overtake them all. So work hard, but understand time and chance may be working against you as well. Moreover, man does not know his time. Like fish caught in a treacherous net, and birds trapped in a snare, so the sons of man are ensnared at an evil time when it suddenly falls on them. You might be a very wise person. You might be an intellectual person. You might be a great athlete. But things aren't always going to work out for you, because life is kind of like a bird that gets caught in a net, or a fish that gets caught in a net, and it's going to be ensnaring to them, and life will ensnare you if you're not careful, if you don't follow the teachings that we have here in Scripture. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, very famous passage here in the book of Ecclesiastes, very beautiful passage. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. So however you might be living your life, whatever you might be doing, sometimes bad things will happen. Solomon says there is a time to give birth and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up. This is a beautiful passage. And it and the other passages, the other verses here in Ecclesiastes will help us keep our perspective. This is a very beautiful passage, but it is also a dark and sobering passage. A time to lose, a time for war, and a time to hate. We're good when things are good, but we struggle sometimes when things get just a little off kilter, a little out of place. That really upsets our apple cart. We get a bee in our bonnet. And we don't like it when the littlest of things happen and go against what we think things should be. But Solomon is telling us, hey, you need to realize that this is how things are. I believe it's chapter 10 and verse 1. Yes, dead flies make a perfumer's oil stink, so a little foolishness is weightier than wisdom and honor. So you've got a bottle of perfume and a fly gets in it. What's going to happen? It's going to spoil that perfume. You know, most all of our perfumes are bottled up, right? So let's look at it this way. You've got a bowl of soup and a fly gets in it. Doesn't that ruin all of it? Just ruins all of it. There it is. I'm not going to eat this anymore. You find a little bitty hair. You got hair all over you. But you got a hair in your soup or a hair in your piece of cake, and that's just the end of it at that point because the one little thing ruins it. That's how we look at life. Is that we see all the bad that's around us and we don't just accept it. It upsets us a great deal. This passage also is very poetic. And it reminds us of the inevitability of trouble and evil, and of the relentless monotony of life. That's why it says, as it does, there is a time to do this and a time to do that. But there is also balance in this passage. Balance that we must recognize. Many of our troubles start because we want something to be different. But Solomon is trying to tell us in the book of Ecclesiastes, look, life is messy, and we need to accept that. So what is life all about? First off, let's ask what causes you pain. Probably much of what I have listed and discussed this morning. If you have pain in your life, it's because of something you've done or something that you're looking at or envisioning in your life, and it's really, really, really dragging you down. So whatever causes you pain, think about that right now. Ecclesiastes chapter 2 and verse 11 says, "Thus I considered all my activities, which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity, and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun." So all the pain that you have, consider that. All the good that you have going on in your life, consider that, and let's just move it over to the side. Because there's probably no profit in it ultimately. Ultimately, though, what does make the difference? What makes the difference, Christian, is a relationship with God. Let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 12 says this, "I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God." Okay, that fly is going to ruin your soup, but you've got to realize that there are good things in this world, and you must realize that when you're eating, when you are drinking, it is a gift from God. Verse 14, "I know that everything God does will remain forever." There is nothing to add to it, and there is nothing to take from it. You can depend on God. You can't depend on whatever's causing you pain. You can't depend on a lot of people sometimes. You can't depend on work. You can't depend on riches. You can't depend on whatever drugs there might be in your life that's harming you. You can't depend on any of those things. You can depend on God. For God has so worked that men should fear Him. Chapter 3, verses 12 through 14. Chapter 2 and verse 24. Let's go there, chapter 2 and verse 24. This talks about the answer to working too much. I love this passage as well. Verse 24, "There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good, being glad of what he is doing on a regular basis. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God." God blesses you with what you have. "For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without Him?" God must be in your life. That's what life is all about. That's the meaning of life. God must be with you. Whether you're going after riches, whether you're working too much, whatever it is you're doing, it's all vanity. You must trust in the love and power of God. Verse 26, "For to a person who is good in his sight, He has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, while to the sinner He's given the task of gathering and collecting, so that he may give to one who is good in God's sight." You'll be blessed if you have that relationship with God. This too is vanity and striving after the wind, if you're going after things that you should not. So Solomon's wisdom gives us a glimpse of what life is. We struggle sometimes because we can't go with the flow. We struggle a lot of times because we have our focus on all the wrong things. And I want to leave you with the last passage, because if you had time to talk to Solomon, he's speaking to us through the book of Ecclesiastes. If you had time today to talk to Solomon as we have, what's the last thing he'd tell you? I think he'd tell you what we find in verses 13 and 14 of chapter 12. The conclusion, when all has been heard, when we've talked about all this, and Solomon's probably thinking, I've lost half of you, and I've confused the rest of you. So he ends up here in chapter 12 in verse 13. The conclusion, when all has been heard, when the preacher's been talking, fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. We're all going about life in different ways, but hopefully we can all know that a relationship with God is what life should be all about. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So it's not about your bank account, it's not about what you do, the places you've tried to find meaning in life these days. What is important is how you are following God. And if you are, because we're all going to be judged someday. If you need to start living for God more and doing more of His will and being more of His servant, come forward this morning. We can help you. We can baptize you. We can pray that your sins will be forgiven. Won't you do that now as we have this opportunity, as we stand and sing?
He is my everything. He is my all. He is my